The truth can shatter everything you thought was real in a single moment. When I found that clinic wristband and those prenatal vitamins in our honeymoon suite, I knew my life would never be the same. My name is Gavin Whitmore, and I'm 32 years old. These days, I spend my mornings building evidence files instead of building the life I'd planned with my wife, Tessa Whitmore. The leather chair in my home office still holds the crisp shape where I sat for hours, documenting every detail of her deception. My former Air Force training taught me that precision matters more than passion when facing an enemy, and that's what Tessa became the moment she orchestrated this betrayal with her lover, Darren Cole. I won't let their lies define my future or break my spirit. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I held up the bottle of prenatal vitamins, watching Tessa's reflection in the hotel mirror. Her eyes widened for just a moment before she composed herself. The diamond on her finger caught the light as she turned to face me, and I remembered how proud I'd been sliding it on her finger months ago. Now that memory felt hollow. "They're supplements," she said, her voice carrying that soft tremor she used when trying to soothe me. "My doctor suggested them early. It's ours, Gavin." I kept my voice steady, though my throat felt like sandpaper. "When exactly did the doctor suggest them?" She reached for my hand, but I kept it firmly at my side. The wristband in my wallet seemed to burn against my leg. Her fingers hung in the air between us before dropping to smooth her silk robe, a nervous tell I'd once found endearing. "I love you," she whispered. "Please trust me." For one crushing moment, I wanted to. The weight of everything we'd built together, the house we'd picked out, the nursery color schemes she'd been texting me, pressed against my chest. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up with a patient portal notification. "Let me see the login," I said, gesturing to her phone. She snatched it up quickly, too quickly. "It's just appointment reminders. Why are you doing this?" "Because dates matter, Tessa. And these dates aren't adding up." Back and forth we went, her deflections growing more desperate with each exchange. Finally, she snapped, "You're ruining our first night." I steadied my tone, though my hands were shaking. "Truth can't ruin what's real." She stared at me for a long moment before grabbing her shower kit. "I need to wash my hair." "We can talk about this when you're being reasonable." The shower started running, and I stood there listening to her hum, while my world cracked apart. Then I saw her purse, carelessly tossed on the chair where she'd been sitting. Something pulled me toward it, that sixth sense that tells you when everything's about to change. Inside, tucked in a hidden pocket, I found another phone. The screen lit up with a new message. From Darren. "8 weeks already? Do you ever wonder if he suspects? I keep thinking about how different things might be if it were just us." The timestamp made my chest constrict. Days before our engagement party. Days before she'd tearfully accepted my proposal in front of both our families. I sank into the chair, the phone feeling like lead in my hand. The shower's steady rhythm continued, along with her humming, creating a surreal soundtrack to the moment my marriage began unraveling, mere hours after it had started. You know that feeling when a truth hits you so hard it actually feels physical? Like someone just knocked all the air from your lungs? That's where I was, sitting in that honeymoon suite, holding evidence that the woman I'd just married had been living a double life. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, Darren's message floated behind my eyelids. 8 weeks already. The words had carved themselves into my brain, each letter a fresh wound. Tessa slept peacefully on her side of the bed, and I'd never felt further from someone lying right next to me. At first light, I slipped out to the hotel balcony, phone in hand. Miles picked up on the second ring despite the early hour. That's the kind of friend he was, the kind who's there before you even have to ask. "I need you," I said, my voice rougher than I expected. "Something's wrong. Really wrong. Where are you?" The rustling of sheets in the background told me he was already getting up. Honeymoon suite. Found prenatal vitamins. A second phone. Messages from someone named Darren about... I had to pause, steady myself. About the baby being 8 weeks along. Miles went quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had that familiar analytical tone I'd relied on countless times before. "Send me your travel records from the past 3 months. Every receipt, every flight stub. I'll cross-reference with what we know about the clinic visits." For the next hour, we pieced it together like a jigsaw puzzle of betrayal. My business trip to Denver, 3 nights. The conference in Seattle, 5 days. Each receipt a timestamp, each location a point on a map that told its own damning story. The timing doesn't work, Gav, Miles finally said. Not even close. You were in Denver during the window when… He let the sentence hang there, knowing he didn't need to finish it. The morning sun felt too bright, too cheerful for the darkness of what we were uncovering. I remembered a morning just like this one, months ago, when Tessa had called with wonderful news. My stomach churned. I've got the clinic dates from the wristband, I said, pulling out my wallet where I'd stored the evidence. The gestational age puts conception exactly during the Denver trip. What's your next move? Miles asked, and I could hear him shuffling papers, probably already making his own timeline. I watched a couple walking hand in hand through the hotel garden below. Yesterday, that could have been us. I have to confront her, directly, with everything we've found. Want me there? No, I said, though the offer meant more than I could express. But stay close to your phone. I might need… What? A witness? An anchor? A reminder that I wasn't crazy for following the evidence to its logical conclusion? Whatever you need, Miles finished for me. I'm here. And Gavin, remember, you're not the one who broke this. You're just the one who found the pieces. I ended the call and spent the next 20 minutes organizing our findings into a folder. Each page told part of the story. Travel receipts, clinic dates, timestamps from messages. The truth, laid out in black and white. Standing outside the suite door, folder tucked under my arm, I took one deep breath. Then another. The hallway carpet muffled my footsteps as I slid the keycard into the lock. Time to face what came next. I laid the folder on the coffee table between us, each page arranged with military precision. Tessa sat across from me, still in her silk robe from the morning, her makeup perfect despite everything. How many mornings had I watched her get ready, thinking I knew every detail of our life together? We need to talk about dates, I said, keeping my voice steady. About timelines. The moment I opened the folder, her face changed. It was subtle. A flicker around her eyes, a slight tension in her shoulders. I'd seen that look before when we'd argue about small things, but this time it carried the weight of something bigger. What is all this? Her voice wavered. The tears started immediately, right on cue. Looking back, I wondered how many times I'd fallen for that same performance. I pointed to the first page. Clinic visits, travel records, phone logs. Each word felt like lead in my mouth. Everything lines up except your story. She stood abruptly, pacing behind her chair. You're being controlling. This is insane, Gavin. Going through my things, making charts like some kind of obsessed… The dates don't lie, Tessa. You're just insecure. Her voice rose, took on that familiar defensive edge. You're going to shame me in front of everyone, aren't you? Turn this beautiful thing into something ugly because you can't trust… I won't shame you, I cut in, my tone flat. The words came out with a certainty that surprised even me. But I won't keep lying for you either. Her pacing stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and my own heartbeat in my ears. Remember when we first moved in together? How the silence between us felt comfortable? Now, it felt like a gulf wider than words could bridge. There was… She started, then sank back into her chair. There was a lapse, one time. But the baby is still yours, Gavin. I know it is. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs might crack. A lapse. One time. The words clashed against Darren's message still burning in my mind. 8 weeks already? Do you ever wonder if he suspects? I pulled out my phone, pulled up the screenshot I'd taken. Does Darren know about this one-time lapse? Color drained from her face. You went through my phone? Your second phone, I corrected. The one you keep in your purse. It's not what you think. 8 weeks, I read aloud. He's counting weeks, Tessa. Wondering if I suspect. That's not a lapse. That's a relationship. She launched into a tangled web of explanations. How Darren meant nothing. How she'd ended it. How she loved me more. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching her hands twist in her lap, watching her eyes dart between my face and the folder, watching her construct a defense for a truth she'd never planned to tell. I looked down at the second phone on the table, its screen dark now, but the message still echoing in my head. This wasn't a mistake made in a moment of weakness. This was calculated, layered, a deception built so carefully that she'd nearly convinced herself of her own lies. Morning light crept through the hotel suite's windows, casting long shadows across the scattered papers on the desk. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tessa's face as she tried to explain away Darren's message. The lies had become her truth. I pulled out my phone and called Miles. He answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "I need a printer," I said without preamble. "And your clear head." 20 minutes later, I was in Miles's home office, watching as pages fed through his printer. Each document felt like another brick in a wall of truth that would soon be impossible to ignore. "Private confrontations give them room to twist things," Miles said, collating the medical records. "They can deny, deflect, make you doubt yourself." I nodded, thinking of Tessa's tears, her accusations of my controlling behavior. "That's why I'm done with private." "What are you thinking?" I pulled up my contacts list, scrolling through both families' numbers. "A breakfast. Tomorrow morning. Something that looks like a thank you gathering for the wedding." Miles stopped sorting papers, studying my face. "Everyone?" "Everyone," I met his gaze, "including the officiant. He needs to see what he witnessed wasn't real. Remember those old war movies where they'd spread maps across tables, planning their strategy? That's what it felt like as Miles and I arranged the evidence. Medical records, travel receipts, phone logs, and at the center of it all, Darren's damning message, timestamp highlighted in yellow. "The timeline has to be perfect," I said, double-checking dates. "No room for doubt." Miles handed me another stack of fresh copies. "How many sets are we making?" "One for each person." My voice was steady, but my hands shook slightly as I sorted the papers. "They'll all see it at once. No whispers, no filtered versions, just pure, uncut truth." I could smell the warm ink from the printer, feel the weight of each page as I slipped them into individual folders. Funny how something as light as paper could carry such gravity. The evidence of betrayal, measured in ounces but weighted in years of trust. After 3 hours, everything was ready. I sat at Miles's desk, typing out the breakfast invitation on my phone. Simple, warm words about gratitude and family, nothing to hint at what would really be served. "You're sure about this?" Miles asked, not questioning my decision but offering one last moment to reflect. I looked at the stack of folders, each one identical, each one loaded with undeniable proof. "You know what my grandfather used to say about lies? They're like creatures that live in the dark. They get bigger, stronger, more dangerous, until someone turns on the light." The message went out to everyone, both sets of parents, siblings, the officiant. A breakfast to thank them for sharing in our special day. As responses trickled in with cheerful acceptances, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, exactly, more like certainty. I slipped the master copy of the evidence into my briefcase, each page in perfect order. Tomorrow, that breakfast table would become an altar of truth. Every person who'd witnessed our vows would witness their undoing. I woke before dawn, though woke implies I'd slept. The manila folders sat in my briefcase like loaded weapons, each one precisely arranged. Miles arrived at the restaurant exactly when he said he would, 7:15 a.m., giving us plenty of time to prepare. "You look like you could use this," he said, sliding me a coffee. The familiar aroma of dark roast brought back memories of countless morning briefings in the Air Force, simple times when truth was still something I could count on. We arranged the private dining room with military precision, each place setting perfect, each chair exactly where it should be. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, catching the silverware and making it gleam. Everything looked innocent, normal, like any other family breakfast. "Table for 12, I murmured, double-checking the count. "Center position gives everyone clear view of the documents." Miles nodded, adjusting a napkin. "Remember, steady pace. Let the evidence speak for itself." At 8:45, guests began arriving. My parents first, Mom's perfume, Dad's firm handshake. The scent of Mom's perfume hit me hard. It was the same one she wore to my graduation. Back then, everything had seemed so clear, so full of promise. Tessa's parents arrived next. Her father's booming laugh filled the room as he clapped me on the shoulder. "There's our new son-in-law." The words landed like stones in my stomach. Her mother hugged me, and I noticed her pearl necklace, the same one she'd worn at our engagement party when Darren's messages were already flowing on that secret phone. "Gavin, darling." Tessa's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her in the doorway, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably took her an hour to choose. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but I saw the flutter in her throat, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her purse. Did she know? Had she guessed why I'd gathered everyone? The officiant arrived last, his presence lending gravity to the room. He'd married us just days ago, his words about truth and commitment still echoing in my ears. Now he'd bear witness to a different kind of truth. As everyone settled into their seats, the cheerful breakfast chatter filled the air. Plates clinked, coffee was poured, and families merged at the table just as they had at the wedding. The normalcy of it all felt surreal against what I knew was coming. Miles caught my eye from across the table and gave an imperceptible nod. The moment had arrived. I reached for my briefcase, my movements deliberate and calm despite my racing heart. The folder felt heavy in my hands as I placed it at the center of the table. Conversation died down as eyes turned to me, curious and expectant. I stood, my chair scraping slightly against the floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. Tessa's smile faltered for just a moment. There and gone, like a glitch in a perfect photograph. Drawing a slow breath, I looked around the table at these people who had witnessed our vows, who deserved to witness the truth. "Before we eat," I said, my voice steady and clear, "there's something you all need to hear." I opened the folder with steady hands, though my heart thundered against my ribs. The morning light caught the edges of the papers, clinic records, travel logs, screenshots, each one a piece of the truth I'd promised myself would see daylight. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming," I began, my voice carrying across the sudden stillness. "What I'm about to share will be difficult to hear, but necessary." The coffee cups stopped clinking, forks settled against plates. I pulled out the first document. On March 15th, I was in Denver for work. Flight records and hotel receipts confirm this. My finger traced down to the next entry. On that same day, there was a clinic visit logged under Tessa's name, the first prenatal appointment. Tessa's mother leaned forward, confusion creasing her forehead. "Prenatal? But you've only been married a few days." "Exactly." The word fell like a stone in still water. I continued through the timeline, each date landing with precision. April 2nd, second appointment. April 18th, ultrasound and blood work. Tessa's hands gripped the edge of the table. "Gavin, stop this. You're making something out of nothing." But her voice wavered, missing its usual confidence. I met her eyes. "Am I?" Reaching for the final document, I felt Miles shift beside me, ready. This message was sent to a second phone I found in your purse, from someone named Darren Cole. The room held its breath as I read, "8 weeks already? Do you ever wonder if he suspects? I keep thinking about how different things might be if it were just us." The timestamp glared from the page. This was sent 3 days before our engagement party. A gasp escaped Tessa's mother. Her father's face had gone pale. The officiant stared at his folded hands, his earlier warmth replaced by something heavier. "You're twisting everything." Tessa's voice rose, desperate. "Those dates don't mean anything. You're just jealous and controlling and—" "Then read this." Miles's calm voice cut through her protests as he slid the patient portal record across the table. The gestational age is clearly stated. If you're certain Gavin's wrong, you should have no problem reading it aloud. I watched Tessa's fingers close around the paper. For a moment, I remembered how those same fingers had straightened my tie on our wedding day, how they'd trembled slightly as we exchanged rings. Now they shook for a different reason. Her eyes scanned the page once, twice. The color drained from her face. The silence stretched, becoming its own kind of testimony. She started, then stopped. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide how her lower lip quivered. "I can't?" The paper slipped from her grasp, floating down to land among the untouched breakfast plates. Her whispered words seemed to echo in the stillness. "I can't read it." In that moment, seeing her crumble under the weight of truth, I felt no satisfaction. Only a cold, final certainty, like a door closing on something that could never be opened again. After the breakfast's revelation, everything moved with a strange, mechanical precision. The courthouse steps felt solid under my feet as I climbed them that afternoon, evidence folder tucked under my arm like a shield. My attorney met me at the top, his expression grim but determined. "The documentation is comprehensive," he said, reviewing the timeline one last time. "Given the circumstances, we should be able to secure an annulment rather than a divorce." The word annulment tasted like relief on my tongue. It meant more than just ending a marriage. It meant legally declaring it had never been valid in the first place. My hands stayed steady as I signed the paperwork, each stroke of the pen feeling like another brick in a wall between me and deception. Inside the judge's chambers 3 days later, the evidence spoke for itself. The clinic dates, the messages, the gestational timeline, they formed an undeniable chain of fraud. I remembered my grandfather teaching me to fish, how he'd said, "Patience and preparation catch more than luck ever will." Standing there, watching the judge review each document, I finally understood what he meant. Given the clear evidence of matrimonial fraud, the judge stated, her voice carrying the weight of authority, this court grants the annulment. She paused, adjusting her glasses. Furthermore, we're implementing full asset protection for Mr. Whitmore and, here, she tapped the paternity timeline, naming Darren Cole as the legal and financial father of the unborn child. Something loosened in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but the relief of truth finally breaking through. My attorney squeezed my shoulder as the judge continued outlining the terms. Darren would receive notice of his paternity obligations within days. The thought didn't bring satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that actions have consequences. Walking out, I passed Tessa in the hallway. She stood with her lawyer, face pale as she clutched a copy of the decree. Our eyes met briefly, hers wide with the dawning reality that her carefully constructed plans had crumbled. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but I kept walking. Whatever words she had left, they couldn't change what was already done. Outside, the afternoon sun hit the courthouse steps with surprising warmth. I loosened my tie, feeling the weight of the annulment decree in my inner pocket. Strange how a few sheets of paper could reshape reality so completely. The breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass from the courthouse lawn, reminding me of easier days. A text from Miles lit up my phone. "Done?" "Done," I replied. "Annulment granted. Assets protected. Darren named as father." I stood there for a moment, watching people move up and down the steps, some entering with worried faces, others leaving with relief or defeat, each of them carrying their own version of justice or consequences. My hand brushed against the decree in my pocket again, and I thought about Darren receiving his notice of paternity obligations, about Tessa facing her new reality. The sky stretched blue and endless above the courthouse dome. I took a deep breath, tasting freedom in the air. Not victory. This wasn't about winning, but something cleaner. Truth, finally set right. The consequences rippled out faster than I expected. 2 weeks after the annulment, Miles called with an update that made my coffee go cold. "Tessa's parents just pulled all support," he said. "Her father called to tell me personally, said they couldn't stomach the level of deception. Not just the pregnancy, but using their reputation to sell the lie at every family gathering." I set my mug down, remembering holiday dinners at their house, how her mother had beamed during toasts about fresh starts and honest love. The memory stung like winter wind against bare skin. "That's not all," Miles continued. "Remember Darren's girlfriend? The one he kept hidden from Tessa? She got wind of the paternity filing through a courthouse clerk she knows. Packed her bags the same day." My throat tightened. Not from sympathy. They'd earned every consequence, but from the weight of how thoroughly lies can destroy everything they touch. I thought of my own parents' marriage, 42 years of steady truth, the way they still looked at each other like they were sharing the same quiet joke. "How's Darren taking it?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why I cared. "Not well. The child support calculations came through. He's looking at serious monthly payments, and his girlfriend was apparently covering most of their rent. He tried reaching out to Tessa for help, but—" Miles paused. "Well, that's the other thing. They're turning on each other." Of course they were. Lies make terrible foundations. Tessa's blaming him for the text messages that exposed everything. He's blaming her for not being more careful with the timeline. Neither of them has anywhere to go, and neither wants to take full responsibility. Miles sighed. "It's getting ugly." I stood up, walked to my temporary apartment's window. Outside, a moving truck rumbled past. Someone else's life in transition. "They did this to themselves," I said, and meant it. "Yeah, they did." Miles cleared his throat. "Which reminds me, I've got better news. The keys to your new place are ready. Want to grab them this afternoon?" My chest loosened at the thought. A new home, clean of deception. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." Hanging up, I caught my reflection in the window glass. The man looking back seemed older than he had on his wedding day, but steadier too. Pain had carved its lines, but hadn't broken what mattered. The morning paper lay on my counter, folded to the real estate section where I'd circled listings weeks ago. Strange how life pivots. One moment you're planning a honeymoon, the next you're measuring square footage for a fresh start. But that's what truth does. It redirects you to where you should have been all along. My phone buzzed again. Miles texting the address of the realtor's office. I grabbed my jacket, ready to move forward. Whatever Tessa and Darren were dealing with now, it was their mess to sort through. They'd chosen each other over honesty, and now they had neither. Sometimes justice works like that. Quiet but complete. I headed for the door, leaving the newspaper behind. The future wasn't in those pages anyway. It was in a set of keys waiting across town, in rooms that would only ever know truth. Miles and I stood on the front steps of my new place, afternoon sun warming the brick facade. The neighborhood hummed with distant lawnmowers and children's laughter, ordinary sounds that felt extraordinary after weeks of courtroom silence. "Ready?" Miles asked, his steady presence beside me just as valuable now as it had been through every confrontation. I pulled out the keys, their brass surface catching the light. The realtor had surprised me with the engraving, a single word stamped into the metal: begin. Sometimes the universe hands you perfect metaphors. "You know," I said, "when I was planning the wedding, I thought I knew what new beginnings felt like." The key slid into the lock with satisfying precision. Funny how different it feels when it's built on truth instead of lies. The door swung open on silent hinges. Empty rooms stretched before us, filled with possibility rather than pretense. I remembered Tessa's text from yesterday, her third attempt to reach out since her family cut ties. I'd left it unanswered, just like the others. Some chapters need to stay closed. "Heard anything new about Darren?" Miles asked as we stepped inside. I set the keys on the kitchen counter, their gentle clink echoing in the unfurnished space. "The court garnished his wages last week. Apparently he tried claiming the paternity test was wrong, but..." I shrugged. "Evidence doesn't lie, even when people do." Miles nodded, running a hand along the smooth countertop. "And Tessa?" "Living with a college friend, last I heard. Her parents sold the car they'd given her as a wedding gift." I moved to the living room windows, watched sunlight pour across hardwood floors. Sometimes justice handles itself. The silence that filled the house felt different from the tense quiet of those first days after discovery. This silence had depth, like the pause between movements in a symphony. It spoke of peace, not absence. "You did it right, you know," Miles said, joining me at the window. "Could have gone nuclear, made it about revenge. Instead, you let truth do the heavy lifting." I thought about that morning at the breakfast table, how simply reading facts aloud had accomplished what no amount of anger could have. "Truth builds better homes than vows," I said quietly. My voice carried in the empty room, and I realized that's exactly what this was: a home built on truth. Every document I'd gathered, every careful step toward justice, had laid this foundation. While Tessa and Darren's deception crumbled under its own weight, I'd constructed something solid. Miles clapped my shoulder. "Want help measuring for furniture?" I pulled out my phone, ready to make notes, but paused to look around once more. The space felt clean, unshadowed. My victory wasn't just about consequences dealt to others. It was about this moment, standing in rooms that would never harbor lies. "Yeah," I said, "let's make this place livable." The keys gleamed on the counter, that single word, begin, catching the light. And for the first time since I'd found those prenatal vitamins, the future looked not just possible, but bright.